Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we will be doing my September reading wrap-up. In the month of September, I have everything written down in my notebook. In the month of September, I read 8 books. 4 of those 8 books were audiobooks, and the other 4 of those 8 books were physical books that I own. So we'll start. So the first book that I read in the month of September was Wildfire by Hannah Grace, which is the second book in the Maple Hills romance. It's like a new adult contemporary romance series that follows players from a hockey team, their college age, and the respective female love interests that each of them have. So far it's been male-female. We'll see where it goes in the future. The first book was Icebreaker, super famous on TikTok, on the interwebs. Everybody loves, or I mean, I guess not everybody loves, but a lot of people love Icebreaker. I surprisingly really liked Icebreaker. I didn't think that I would like the series very much, but here I am, enjoying it. Now I'm looking forward to the third book, but let's talk about the one that I read this month. So again, Wildfire, we follow our 2 love interests. I think it's like Aurora and Russ are their names. Oh my god, I never remember character names, so it's like kind of a big deal when I remember them, but it's probably easier when it's via audiobook. I'm not sure. But yeah, we follow Aurora and Russ. They're both college age. They are working at a summer camp over the summer. They have a little bit of a one-night stand at a college party the night before they both go to work at this summer camp that each of them does not respectively know the other one will be working at. And they are there. And you follow them kind of interacting at the summer camp. I like the summer camp vibes. They're like playing sports and games with kids, and they have friends at the summer camp. And they each have some drama going on with each of their parents, you know, like they each have contentious relationships with their fathers, so they're kind of dealing with that in their own different ways. And I enjoyed it. I didn't like it as much as Icebreaker, honestly. I found the main character, Aurora, in Wildfire to be really annoying. Like, she was pretty darn annoying. She was super immature, and I'm not saying, like, I know this is like a romance series. It's like a spicy-ish romance series with college-age students, but I do feel like in the first book, the main character was fairly mature, in my opinion, which surprised me, but I feel like she was fairly mature. I just felt like Aurora was pretty annoying, super immature. I felt like she was pretty darn selfish. I thought Russ deserved better. So that's kind of why I disliked the book a little bit. But I found the summer camp vibes to be so charming. And it was just such a easy breezy listen. And I was invested in it. And that's all that I'm really asking for when I listen to a romance audiobook. That's all I really want. I want to be excited to listen to it while I'm at the gym, while I'm doing my chores around the house. And for the most part I was. So I think I gave it like 3 stars. Actually, I gave it 4. It's probably more of a 3-star read upon reflection. But yeah, the book that I read after that was Funny Story by Emily Henry. Now I actually have a reading vlog that I like started filming in the month of September. And then I got sick at the end of September for a couple of weeks. I really did not feel good. So I did not continue. I like took a hiatus from the reading vlog, but it should be coming back. So the next video hopefully will be that vlog, but I did feature Funny Story in there. Boy, oh boy, did I love this, and I'm so glad it lived up to my expectations because I really love Emily Henry. I think she and Abby Jimenez are definitely the best in the contemporary romance game right now. I just don't think anybody else comes near them, at least that I've tried. Please, you're welcome to leave down below if you feel like somebody does. I'm here for it. But in my opinion, they really are the best because I feel like both of them, and I know we're talking about Emily Henry right now, but they both create such lovable, real feeling characters that are just very fleshed out, and you can just totally root for the story. I feel like it's not, the romance is not even necessarily the biggest, even though it's a romance, so it is the main thing. The character's life outside of the romance is equally as important, well built up. The stories are just so well rounded, and I feel like you get so much out of them, or at least I do. I'm not sure. And they each have their own different unique writing charm, of course. But Emily Henry is so funny. She's so funny. I will go down with that ship. I think she is so freaking funny, man. Every time I read her books, I have a reading blog where I read Beach Read, People We Meet on Vacation, and Book Lovers. I did that years ago. I'll link that down below. And in Happy Place, funny story, laughing out loud at various points throughout each of the books. I just think her banter between her characters, unparalleled, unmatched, you know? She's really great at creating believable friendships between her love interests, which I think is just it's such an important part of any relationship, is that friendship dynamic. And then really with Emily Henry, then the romantic relationship comes. And I find that to be so beautiful and believable. So I really, really, really love Emily Henry books. What's this one about? I didn't tell you. We follow Miles and our main character. Boy, I'm forgetting her name. Daphne. We follow Miles and Daphne, who each of them are both in relationships. Daphne is about to get married to this dude, don't remember his name, and Miles is in a long-term relationship, or has been in like a 3-year-long relationship with this woman named Petra. Now, Daphne's fiance and Petra were best friends growing up. They were always like, no, it's just a friendship thing. Well, right before Daphne and this dude's wedding, he goes, Petra and I are in love with each other, so I'm leaving you, peace out. And this leaves Daphne and Miles kind of high and dry, so they end up rooming in together. Rooming in together? Is that how you put it? They end up rooming together. They're roommates. There you go. And eventually they strike up a friendship. They're dealing with this together, and they fall in love, and there you go. I love this book. I feel like this is definitely something that I'm going to want to reread. It was just so cozy and comforting. That was really the main takeaway from this. It was funny, and it was cozy, it was comforting, it was beautiful. Loved it. I love the small town vibes kind of going on here. Our main character, Daphne, is a children's librarian, and Miles works at a winery as like a sommelier. I loved Miles. I loved Miles and Daphne, and I love how Miles, his whole thing was feeling like he wasn't good enough. And then they each, jumping around, both of them too, as well as in Wildfire, have interesting, contentious relationships with their parents, so that's a dynamic. Don't we all, you know? I feel like that's a dynamic in a lot of romance books, which is cool. Anywho, yeah, and I feel like Miles, what I loved, getting back to what I was saying, what I loved was that one of Miles' insecurities was that he wasn't good enough for Petra, because her family made him feel bad about the fact that he, you know, didn't do a certain type of job. He didn't make a bunch of money. And they really just kind of shat on his character. You know what I mean? Sorry I said that, but they really kind of looked down upon the type of person that he was. So I really, really loved the type of person that he was. I loved that you could really see what his values were. And I totally appreciate it. And I love Daphne for her values as well. And I think that they were just so perfect when they came together. And I loved how great Miles was, just always showed up for Daphne, which was her big thing because she had a father who did not always show up for her. And loved it. Loved the vibes. Totally here for it. So glad I finally picked up Funny Story, because I was totally that was one of my most anticipated books of this year. And I'm so glad. I loved it so much. After that, I listened to The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins, which is a mystery thriller book that is fairly forgettable. It is it was set like in North Carolina, maybe South Carolina, one of the Carolinas. And we are following, I don't remember if we were following from multiple perspectives, but we definitely heard from Camden. Jules are the main characters, and they're married. And Camden was the adopted son of this extremely wealthy woman who we are also hearing from, who we are hearing from her through letters she had written, because present day she has passed away, and Camden has to come back to his family home that he has now inherited, and kind of deal with it, because his family is like super wealthy, kind of owns the town in a way, and his family is full of like people that suck, totally suck, and are like, you are not part of this family because you were adopted. You're not part of this family by blood. And so he has to come back and kind of deal with stuff going on. I forget what was the main See, I don't even remember, and I didn't even listen to it that long ago. I don't even necessarily remember what the main mystery was. Was it a murder mystery? Well, there you go. This is my review. I don't even remember. But I know that Camden's mother was like writing about her life story because she had a bunch of husbands that all died while she was married to them. So she's like telling the story of her life. That's all I'm going to say about the Heiress. I thought it was kind of like a slight vibe while I was listening to it. I obviously didn't DNF it, but it was forgettable and I didn't love it. There you go. But I gave it 3 stars, so not really any problems. It was just, I guess I forgot it. The 4th book that I read in September was The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, which this is also a part of that blog that I previously mentioned that should hopefully be going up next. We will see. And this is a nonfiction book about Russia in the 20th century and the Soviet Union and the gulags that existed there. Alexander Solzhenitsyn lived in one of these gulags for a period of time. He was a prisoner, at one of these gulags for maybe like 10 years, I believe it was. And this is his nonfiction account of history, politics, life there, different people that lived there, torture that went on at these gulags. And I felt like it was really informative. I picked this up because for some reason I just fixated on Russia for a few weeks there in September, and I really wanted to learn about the history of Russia, specifically in the 20th century, because I knew that there's always kind of a lot going on there, but I knew that the Soviet Union existed, and I knew it wasn't good, but I didn't really know specifics about it. Any of these gulags existed, but I didn't really understand. So I picked this up because I wanted to try to understand the chronological history of Russia throughout the 20th century. I have another book called Secondhand Time by Svetlana Alexievich. I'm trying to look for it under my desk, but I don't see it, which is about it's about post-Soviet Union Russia. So hopefully I'll pick that up in the next few months. But this was, to kind of like follow along with that chronology, but this was, it was tiring to read. It's like a heavy nonfiction book that had a lot to do with Russian politics, obviously, as you can imagine. And I was trying to digest as much as I could as I was reading it, so I really took my time with it, and I read half of it, put it down, read something else. What was it? I don't remember. I think it was Funny Story that I read halfway through picking this up, and then I finished it after I read Funny Story. Yeah, it was heavy. It felt like it started to get a little bit repetitive to me at some points, so I was slightly bored at certain times, but there were a lot of anecdotes about the tenacity of the human spirit with specific real life characters that lived in these gulags that Alexander Solzhenitsyn either encountered himself or heard about through the grapevine, through stories, what have you, I don't know. So I enjoyed hearing about that. It did mildly remind me of Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. However, this was obviously not like a psychological, philosophical manifesto on how to deal with terrible things. This was really a man wanting to recount like the atrocities of what went on. Really him talking about how the country got to be where it was, talking about the atrocities of these gulags, of the Soviet Union. I felt like it just had so much bitterness and anger in it, which totally valid and justified considering what these people went through. But in my head as a modern day reader, which I don't know if this is necessarily fair, Man's Search for Meaning was, you know, somebody experiencing atrocities, but it had like such a hopeful, positive lean to it. Such like a beautiful, human, hopeful lean to it, which this one was just like super angry and heavy almost, but informative. I don't know if I got my point across there. There you go. That was the Gulag Archipelago. I'm glad that I finished it, but I am glad that I read it as well. So there you go. After the Gulag Archipelago, I picked up One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by the same author, so Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And this is the fictionalized version of One Day in the Life, following one specific character, prisoner at one of these gulags. And it felt like a lot of the same thing. I just wanted to read this right after. I thought that it would be a fun little experiment. And it was, but I gave this 3 stars. There was nothing wrong with it. I think maybe I was just not entirely moved by the story for some reason, which I don't know if that makes me sound like a terrible person, but I'm just being honest. I think that, again, his writing style was just really, it just felt pretty bitter and angry to me, which again, totally justified. I gotcha. But as a reader, I just didn't necessarily, it wasn't like my favorite thing to read. Again, super informative. I'm really glad that I read it. And I think that this, if this does sound interesting, if you are interested in this topic, I absolutely think that you should read this. Or this. Do you need to read both? I guess maybe. I think in the vlog that I'm talking about, because I read both of these in that vlog, I think I was like, I don't think you need to read both. They feel like the same thing. So if you want to, go for, you know what? Leave that up to your own discretion. I'm glad I did, maybe, but now I know about that, you know? The 6th book that I read in September was another audiobook, and we have A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston, and I strongly disliked this book. So this was my second Ashley Poston book, which is also a contemporary romance with a little bit of a magical realism twist and lean to it. I think all of her books are like magical realism leaning contemporary romances kind of. I read The 7-Year Slip this year. I don't understand why that is so hyped. I don't understand why that got so hyped. I give it 2 stars. I think I gave A Novel Love Story 1 star. Yeah, that fits. I don't like Ashley Poston's books. I think that I'm done. So, you know, I wonder if the next book she comes out with, I'm just going to get caught up with like the hype and the buzz for it. I'm just going to want to listen to it, but I really don't like them. I had to push myself through listening to this book, almost in the same way that I had to push myself through listening to The 7-Year Slip. But that was, I was curious to see where that one would go, so it was a little bit easier to follow through with it. I really had to push myself through this. I just think that both The 7-Year Slip and A Novel Love Story were just way too corny, cheesy, saccharine, but not good. Like, without any depth. I feel like it's missing the depth. It's super surface level trying to be deep, but it's like really cheesy. And I dislike it. So in A Novel Love Story, we follow our main character who her fiance, again, the week before her wedding, leaves her for somebody else, and she's obviously upset about this. And then we're following her, I think like 2 or 3 years later, after when she is going on a trip by herself, which this trip is a trip that she usually takes with her book club to this cabin to like read romance books. Our main character is a English professor, I think, and so she's going to this cabin by herself because something happened this year and no one else can go with her. That's okay. So she's going by herself, but she gets stuck in this town because something happens with her car, and this town's like a magical town that's fake, but it's like from her favorite romance book series. And so she gets stuck in this town and she's interacting with all the different characters, and she meets a dude there and they fall in love. And she's trying to like figure out if she's interfering with his romance storyline in this series, how he kind of ties into the whole thing. But it was just super cheesy. It was just so cheesy. I didn't like it, and that's about that. I don't get the Ashley Poston hype at all. Number 7, we have The Truth According to Ember by Danica Nava, which was another contemporary romance that I listened to on audiobook. I love listening to romances on audiobook, and this was fine. This was a debut, and we are following our main character who, I forget which tribe she comes from, but she is Native American, so I was really excited because I don't feel like we usually see a lot of that representation in romance books. So I know that this was a pretty buzzy release this year, and I was really looking forward to it, so I'm really glad I got to listen to it. And again, we follow our main character. She doesn't have a lot of money. She did finish high school. She didn't get to finish getting an associate's degree in accounting. She wants to be an accountant. She can't get a job. She has a difficult time getting a job working in accounting. And so she creates a fake application, a fake job application, and she ends up getting a job as an accounting assistant at this company. She ends up becoming like an executive assistant very quickly. She meets this guy that works at her company. He is the IT guy, and they have a little bit of an office romance, but she's also pretty stressed out because she's trying to keep all these secrets that she has. Eventually her secrets come out. But I liked it. I thought it was charming. It felt like a debut. It really did feel like a debut. It felt like it was hitting all of the story marks, but not necessarily doing anything else. And that's fine. I'll give it to it. I gave it 3 stars. I would recommend reading it or listening to it if it sounds interesting to you at all. I feel like what was lacking in this book was honestly the chemistry between the main characters. I don't really feel like they had a lot of chemistry. I feel like they were just all of a sudden dating, and I couldn't really see why they got to that point. But I wasn't mad at it at all. I liked her background. I liked her family story. Her brother was in prison, and then getting out of prison, and she had used a lot of her money on his bail that he skipped, so she was upset that he essentially made her waste her college funds. But it was about just kind of like a normal human being trying to figure out their finances, figure out what they wanted to, figure out what they wanted to do with their lives, make something of themselves, just have a nice, simple, steady life. And I really appreciated it for that. So again, if it sounds interesting, pick it up. I don't know if it'll blow your mind, but it was cozy. It was good. So the last book that I read in September was The Lady's Paradise by Emil Zola, which I did pick up because of the World Tour Book Club that I know a bunch of people are following because of Emma from the channel Emmy. Yeah, I really like this. I gave it 4 stars. It's a translated French classic. I don't think I've ever read anything by Emil Zola before. I know he was super prolific. I'm trying to rack my brain to see if I have, but I don't think so. And this, so it's set in Paris. We're following our main character, Denise, who doesn't have a lot of money. She has 2 younger brothers that she has to support because her parents recently died. She's pretty young. She's probably 16 in this. I'm not sure, but she's has to support her brothers. Which, you know what, I'm going to get to that in a second because one of her brothers seemed to be old enough to support himself. If he's running around having all these affairs with these women that were married, which he was, and he was constantly asking his sister for money, he should get a job too. But that wasn't a part of, really a plot point of the book. Anyhow, so again, Denise is coming to Paris. She's expecting to get a job with her uncle, who owns a small business selling fabrics in Paris, but right across the street, when she gets there, she's forlorn and confused because right across the street, there's a big department store that's new that's really causing a lot of problems for all of the small businesses in Paris and around the area. And she kind of becomes, like everybody else, infatuated in her own way with this department store. And you really see the craze that this department store creates, how it's really changing the consumer landscape of the world of Paris at the time. So she starts working at this department store. You see her like dealing with the people working there, how that kind of works out. But the owner of the department store eventually ends up becoming infatuated with Denise, kind of falling in love with Denise. She has her own story that she kind of goes through, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot about morality. Is a huge theme in this. Integrity is a huge theme in this. Denise is really has like a lot of integrity, and which is such like a Victorian theme, which is like the time period that this was written, and I know this is French, but still. So that was a huge theme. Also, this book was really, I want to say, primarily like an ode to department stores, it felt like, because there was so much description of the architecture, like the way that the building was built, the way that each room was set up, what the fabrics looked like, how the owners thought of ways to create advertisements to get their customers in the store, what their customers looked like, what they were potentially thinking, everything that they were buying, the craze that this department store created, and how this caused problems for so many people. But also, like, it was kind of a positive thing at the same time. So I thought that it had a really good balanced look at this changing world that was happening at the time, the way the world was changing in regards to shopping and consumerism at this time. So that was super fascinating. Again, I gave it 4 stars. I feel like it was lacking in the character development. It really felt like more of a story about the department store than the characters. But they were there. That was like part of it. And if it sounds interesting to you, I'd recommend it. I think that it's a totally worthwhile read. I'm really glad that I read it. I feel like if there was a little bit less about the department store and maybe like 50% more about the characters and their internal struggles and their relationships with each other, it could have totally been a 5-star read. But alas, it did not have those things, so here we are. So those are the books that I read in the month of September. Please let me know if you have read any of these books, what you thought of them. Please let me know also what you have read in the month of September. Thanks again so much for watching. Goodbye.